Hi guys, it's Danny. Alrighty, so one of the main reasons why we have so many diverse orchids in our homes today is hybridizing. And not that there aren't enough beautiful and diverse species in the wild, but let's just say there aren't enough species that can do well in a home environment or in an environment with less than ideal conditions. So here's where hybrid vigor comes into place. So as I was saying, by hybridizing, people didn't only try to obtain more beautiful and diverse flowers and patterns, but they also created more vigorous hybrids. What does this vigor mean? Well, it means a more robust plant, a more adaptable plant, and overall a plant that we can actually grow pretty successful in our own home or in our own conditions, because no matter how much we actually try to imitate the exact environment they usually have in nature, we simply cannot. There are certain elements we cannot recreate, and those are more in the sense of biological and chemical aspects. So just like the title says, I'll give you some examples. Here I have a very vigorous hybrid. This is a Beallara and the complete name is Beallara Diana Dan Gothic. It has recently been reclassified as an Alisara. But let's not focus on new names, and I'll tell you why in a second. So here I have a very vigorous plant. How do I know it's vigorous? Well, let's take a look at the actual plant. And here is my plant. If we take a look at the root system, we can see that it's less than ideal. I only have some new roots grown here, and they're not that many. However, the new pseudobulb created is not very tiny compared to the older one. It is tinier, yes, because I forced her to get adjusted to a totally new environment and way of growth, although this is not permanent, I know you might ask. However, it still managed to create a decent looking pseudobulb. It is a decent size. And also it managed to create quite a beautiful flower, even though this orchid is actually capable of producing multiple flowers. And as you can see here, I do have some buds that actually dried and faded. However, the flower itself and the orchid itself looks quite nice. And I did discover that with most Beallaras, this is the case. They are those types of hybrids which are pretty vigorous. This means they can easily grow in a home, even if you don't have too much humidity. You don't necessarily need a greenhouse to be able to grow these beauties. And in my experience, most Beallaras will act like this, and they will do pretty fine if you give even the basic care needs. And now let's take a look at this sad creature. This is a no-ID hybrid, but it is an intergeneric nonetheless. And judging by the shape of the flower, this is a Wilsonara. Now, in my experience, Wilsonaras are not as vigorous. They do create beautiful flowers, however, when it comes to bouncing back, they're really not as adapted. You can see here how much smaller this new pseudobulb is, and also it didn't leaf out properly, and this new growth I suspect will be even smaller if I don't correct something in my environment. So in this case we cannot talk about the vigor, the hybrid vigor aspect. So as you can see, not all hybrids are actually that vigorous. Now another type of hybrid that I consider very vigorous and very adaptable to home conditions are the Colmanaras, particularly the wildcats, but Colmanaras in general, like the Masai Red. You will probably have less chances to ruin a Colmanara than a Oncidiums, let's call it like that. Although with Oncidiums there is a difference. So here I have a certain type of intergeneric. Of course it has been renamed to Oncidium, which is slightly misleading, and I don't enjoy these new names. I would prefer to have the old names back, because Colmanara to me means a vigorous hybrid. All the Colmanaras that I had were vigorous, given half a chance. So you see in this case, again, I do have tinier pseudobulbs, but they did develop completely. They even bloomed. You can see here an old flower spike. So with these hybrids, we can talk about that hybrid vigor. And really honestly, you cannot say the same thing about other Oncidiums. But with Colmanaras, the ones that I had, it was all about vigor, it was all about big, strong root systems and big pseudobulbs, and actually flowering every time, every season. And here is the crowd favorite, the best example of hybrid vigor. This is a complex hybrid Phalaenopsis orchid. Compared to some species, she is much more resilient. And if you don't know the story with this one, this is a lot of spider mite damage. She was full of spider mites for a year. However, with a little bit of treatment, she's already producing a leaf. And it's not a tiny leaf, as you can see, it will grow bigger. And I'm happy to say that after the hairspray treatment, it's looking a lot better. But there you go, we have new roots growing here. new leaf growing here, and she has been really abused. So with Phalaenopsis complex hybrids, you have the best chances to have a vigorous hybrid. Being overly hybridized by humans means you have a greater chance to have a very vigorous hybrid. And this is practically what happens with the Phalaenopsis hybrids of today. Compared to species, they are a bit more adaptable. I can see that with the species that I have. I even lost one of the species that I had. However, with the hybrids, everything is going well. Now, as I was saying, not all hybrids are vigorous, and I can mention here the Nelly Eiler. So sometimes by hybridizing you obtain a beautiful plant, however you lose some of the vigorousness. But the bottom line is that by hybridizing you can obtain the beauty of a finicky orchid and the vigorousness of a not so pretty orchid, let's say, and you can obtain spectacular creatures, as the one that I show you here, which is one of my favorites. Okay guys, thank you for watching this video. Hope you found it interesting. If you'd like to see more videos from me regarding orchids and other beautiful plants, simply subscribe to my channel. I post on a daily basis. Also, feel free to leave me questions or suggestions for videos in the comment section below. I always read them. If you click on the left side of your screen, you'll be directed to orchidnature.com, where you'll find care sheets, identification sheets, and also you can talk to us in the forum section. And on the right side of your screen, you can click to watch another orchid video. Thank you for joining. I'll see you next time. Bye!